The topic for this audio is choosing your bloodline if you are just getting started in the dog game. One of the toughest decisions you will have to make is which family or families of dogs to start with. The varieties of bloodlines to choose from are endless, from Grand Champion Ace to Grand Champion Zabo and everything in between. What makes choosing so difficult is in almost every issue of the Sporting Dog Journal there is a new line, or dog, that is winning impressively, and it is very easy to jump on the bandwagon to get something from this particular dog or line of dogs. With proper research, choosing a line can be the difference between a rewarding and enjoyable career in the dogs or just a series of disappointments. It is suggested that a novice experiments with several different bloodlines, so they can get a feel of the game, before they settle down with one particular line. Patrick owned many different bloodlines before he purchased Bolio. The problem with owning several different bloodlines is in future expectancies. For instance, let's say you start with a Zabo-bred bitch, a Boomerang-bred male, and a Bolio-bred male. While all three may be good dogs, you're also going to end up with three very different dogs that may require three different feeding programs, three different keeps, etc. One is tough enough, even for the experienced dog man. Just imagine the pressure of this on a beginner who has to figure out three different keeps. With three different dogs you may end up with one excellent match dog, one good brood dog, and one worth nothing. In other words, those three different bloodlines, when crossed together, may not produce what you are looking for. By staying with one family of dogs or two lines that cross well together, this is one way to better your chances of getting those desired characteristics you're breeding for. Before one chooses a specific line of dogs, you should research everything you possibly can before determining which line of dogs you are going to be breeding. By researching, I mean you should have knowledge of the breeder, how long the line of dogs have been bred, and what to expect of the line. The breeder, get to know the breeder, because most of your dealings will consist of phone calls, some letters, and maybe nowadays some emails. Try to locate someone who has purchased dogs from this breeder and ask his/her opinion about the breeder and his dogs. Check in the Reader's Right section of the journal and see if there are any complaints or compliments publicized regarding this breeder. Also remember, every breeder will tell you whatever you need to hear to guide you to purchasing a pup from his yard. Some will even go as far as to degrade another breeder to deter you from his competition. The term puppy peddler always seems to come to mind when dealing with these types of breeders. J.P. Colby was considered the first puppy peddler, because he was the first breeder to sell his dogs to the public. In those days, it was not acceptable to sell to the public, according to the earlier fraternity. I often hear of people complimenting Tom Gardner, STP, Vince Cooper, and Vernon Whitley, to name a few well-known breeders. Another question to ask is if the breeder is using what he is selling. For instance, I know a well-known breeder who breeds and sells 2 or 3 other bloodlines to the public, but uses the line that he is most noted for. If the breeder doesn't feel confident enough to use what he sells, then why should you buy it? Longevity. How long has the bloodline been established? Some breeders have been breeding the same lines for most of their tenure with these dogs. If it's said that it takes 7 generations or 14 years of breeding your own dogs to create your own line of dogs, don't get confused by puppy peddlers like Chipo Lopez that scream of having a bloodline but can't show dogs with 7 generations top and bottom of their work. At best, some of his dogs may have 2 or 3 generations of his work, but that does not make a bloodline. Only Greenhorn believe his tall tales. Ha 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 ha. There are fellows who have been around long enough to have established their own lines of dogs, and there are some dogs that have been bred enough to have established their own lines. Then there are the peddlers, who breed puppies to puppies, brothers to sisters, fathers to daughters, and so on until they get 7 generations of dogs with their name as the breeder. All this in maybe 5 years, so they can say they have established their own line of dogs. These are the ones that you need to beware of. Below are a few names of some dogmen who have established their lines with patience and time. Patrick. He has been making the Indian Bolio/Tombstone crosses for 3 decades. His breedings were the catalysts to some greats like Bullboy Bob Ram, Ch. Tonka Ram, Red Lady Rom, Grand Champion Buck Rom, and Dirty Mary Rom. Bobby Hall. His name has become synonymous with Bullison. Vince Cooper, known for maintaining Boomerang, Jeru Ch. Booger Rom, blood through Champion Opie, and also Bolio, blood through Grand Champion and Boss. Bert Sorrells. He has been breeding the same line of dogs for as far as I can remember, and has had his ad appear in the Gazette for as long as I have been reading the magazine. Supernat. When you say Supernat, the next word is usually Grand Champion Ace. His yard is based on the blood of Champion Charlie, Grand Champion Angus, Grand Champion Zibbo Rom, and Grand Champion Ace. Ozzie Stevens, a reputed breeder and winner. His dogs are based on Champion Homer Rom, and his yard contains the blood of other dogs he has owned and bred, that is Grand Champion Virgil Rom, Champion Zero, Champion Coley Boy, Champion Rastus, Champion Tammy, Champion Wiley, Grand Champion Snake, Jr., Geraldine Rom, Troll Rom, and Ramona Rom, to name a few. All of these breeders, and their lines, and there are plenty more, are proving to be consistent winners and producers of winners. As a novice, try to avoid the line of dogs that have yet to establish themselves. That destroyer of today may be the disappointment of tomorrow. Buying an American Pitbull pup, it takes 2.5 to 3 years to breed, raise, school and test a litter of dogs, and, of course, many of them don't make the grade, but the buyer still expects each one to be perfect. And most of them want Gr.Ch. art for the price of a newspaper poodle. Those who have tried breeding and raising a number of dogs seem to have more respect for the breeder than those who just picked up a breaking stick 6 months ago, and more respect for a good dog also. What I find presently aggravating is the way some buyers shop for a dog or pup based solely on pedigrees, or perhaps one or two famous performers from a certain line. Bloodlines come and go so quickly in this game that if one breeds a litter of what is popular today, by the time he has them raised they are likely to be yesterday's news, and the buyers want something entirely different. For that reason, and others, I choose not to conform to what is currently popular, but rather to just breed the best dogs that come along. Consequently, I suppose my pedigrees may look pretty scatterbred or haphazard to some, but it is a result of raising a lot of dogs and simply letting the cream rise to the top come testing time. I forget their names and leave their pedigrees at the house, as it were, and play no favorites. I have learned long ago that if you lie to yourself about your dogs, it will only cost you more in the long run. My dilemma comes in trying to satisfy customers who are pedigree shopping. They ask what bloodlines my dogs are out of, and I have to respond something like Rascal, Alligator, Tudor, Leitner, Bullison, Tombstone, Bolio, etc. It seems most people refer to landmark dogs or breeders in their pedigrees, and my landmarks have fallen rather far back. Now, through my experience and research, I know, for instance, that the Plumber Ch. Alligator is half Tudor breeding, Jeff, Spike, Black Widow, through Nigger, and half Carver breeding through Satin Lady. I also know that Bolio is very heavy in the blood of Black Widow and Ibo, and, as such, is closely related to the Nigger dogs, and therefore is a line breeding, not an outcross. Bolio is probably related to the Carver side too, but since so many Carver pedigrees were intentionally misrepresented by him and others, we'll never know for sure. The point is that although many of the older breeders know how the different bloodlines are related, on paper anyway, many of the buyers do not. And pedigrees that may be a life's work of line breeding may look to them like a hodgepodge of unrelated strains bred together by some ignorant old codger who doesn't have a clue. Well, maybe the prospective buyer should give the old farts a little more credit. Speaking only for myself, I have made all the mistakes possible breeding dogs. And I think it has made me a better breeder for having made them. A lot of breeding, after all, is knowing what dogs not to breed. The point I've been driving at is that I think the person one buys a dog from is much more important than the bloodlines the dog is from. Two different breeders can start with the exact same dogs, and in a few generations one will have improved greatly upon his foundation dogs and the other may have completely ruined his. How? By the choices one makes every time a litter is bred. Be very careful and stay away from puppy peddlers who try to coin words like platinum vein to identify their dogs. These are just money-thirsty individuals using these words and giving themselves merits to confuse people new to the dogs. Some things to stay away from? Curs, of course, cold dogs, hunching dogs, non-scratching dogs, scratching but not follow-through dogs, and so on. In other words, deviants from the norm, or weirdos as I like to call them. And, just as important and often overlooked, dogs that are bred from parents and grandparents that fall into these categories. But what if he or she is a super bulldog? Should I not breed to him, her just because one or both parents are weird? The answer is, if you want to keep coming up with weirdos, that is how you get them. Even if the dog is right in every way, he will produce some screwed up dogs. Practically every dog does. And in my opinion, breeding to these deviants is why overall, our breed is so screwed up and so difficult to breed good dogs from today. I know it's easy to get confused and get on the wrong track. I know of breeders with 20 or 30 years experience that haven't figured all this out. Big Mouth Lopez comes to mind. It is easy to become frustrated, to fall prey to the stories of curs producing game dogs producing curs, etc. ad infinitum. Some of them are true, and it is mainly attributable to breeding errors like those I've mentioned before. The bottom line is, if you want consistency, who doesn't, you have to breed only to dogs that conform to a certain standard. If you do this for several generations, all the other crap seems to disappear. That has been my experience anyway. And I have gone from breeding a whole litter of cold dogs 15 years ago, out of very game parents, to getting litters with 75% or 80% good dogs. Yes, I'm referring to these scatterbred rascal, alligator, car, bullison, etc. mutts I currently have. I'm just going to start calling them Russian-bred dogs, I guess. It's a lot easier. Finally, to the novice, this advice. Don't get too involved with pedigrees or with who was breeding good dogs 20 years ago. Don't be too quick to breed to that multi-time winner either. Unfortunately, performance doesn't guarantee prepotency. How many great dogs have you seen that were out of two grand champions bred together? Not many, right? Ever wonder why not? In fact, many great performers have been total flops in the brood pen. Why? One explanation may be, believe it or not, a lack of gameness. Most of the really great dogs never sustain much injury. Some of them act bad when they get in a little trouble, but their ability gets them out of it quickly and they go on to win. I've seen several champions myself that acted badly, and I wouldn't breed a coyote to them, but you won't read about this behavior in a 2-sentence match report sent in by the winner. You won't see it mentioned in his stud ad, either. Unless you are in a position to raise a lot of dogs, you'd be better off waiting a couple of years to see what the latest super dog is producing. Ask what he's produced. If he's been bred too extensively for 3 or 4 years and has only produced 1 or 2 good dogs out of a dozen or more litters, it might be best to avoid him. Regarding pedigrees, what was a good line 10 or 20 years ago may have fallen apart by now. And to you who are inclined to paper breed, remember, papers can be falsified, and many have been. Some breeders even have been known to register a dog one way and then go back and change his breeding years later, perhaps because he's pushing a certain bloodline more now, and this has been allowed and even condoned by the dog magazines. Gr. Buck's many pedigrees are a good example of this. He started out pure Tombstone X Dolly, and now neither dog is even in his pedigree. There are no safeguards, unfortunately. Anyone who buys an ad can put in anything he chooses, so be careful. And try to give the honest breeder some credit. It's a lot easier to get champions and drums by cheating than by doing it the honest way. But if you do it right, your accomplishments mean a lot more. I think the key to buying a good pup is asking the right questions. Such as, how many litters has he bred, raised, schooled and tested, a measure of his experience. Regarding your pup or dog, what are the parents like? Are they hot or cold? Have they been tested? Did they show to be good dogs? Yes, Believe it or not, some people will test a dog and if it doesn't show well will breed it anyway with justifications like, but look at his pedigree. Or he wasn't feeling well that day, or he's got the mouth, I'll put the scratch in there with the bitch, and so on. Same for the grandparents. Again, the same for the great-grandparents. Now, of course, you can be lied to, so check out the seller's credentials with his peers in the fraternity, too. That is why puppy peddlers like Cheapo Lopez tells people not to ask questions in groups where the fraternity socializes. Cheapo is afraid that you will ask questions like, is he known for honesty or is he a paper hanger and pedigree changer? I always assume if a man will lie about one thing, he'll lie about anything, and make my judgments accordingly. I'm seldom proven wrong about this. If you follow these suggestions, I feel you will have a much better chance of getting a good one. But remember, even if you buy a top-bred pup, the environment he's raised in and his care and feeding are just as important as his breeding. You get out of them what you put into them. More if they're bred right. It is my hope that you can avoid the rip-offs, intentional or not, and find that good dog you are looking for. I hope this will be of some assistance in your search. If you enjoyed this audio, please do press the like button so others can find the video, and also subscribe to the Tony Montana channel. This channel is for truth, information, and for Pitbull love.